In recent years, in the wake of the big and small ideological conflicts, there seems to have been a surge of interest in what defines us as Europeans, or perhaps more broadly, bearers of the Western culture. Many apologists have popularized the idea of so-called Judeo-Christian values being formative of what we are. Let us examine one such claim brought forth by Mr. Prager in his video, Judeo-Christian Values. Mr. Prager, the stage is yours. Not for long.
Have you ever heard the term Judeo-Christian values? I suspect you have. Can you name any of those values? I suspect you can't.
Yes. Though in the context you are using the term in, not that long ago. Yeah, the values I did hear about in the past were not that bizarre hybrid you guys seem to have come to love. But do go on, kind sir.
But you should, because Judeo-Christian values are the moral foundation of Western civilization. As the great British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher put it, the truths of the Judeo-Christian tradition are infinitely precious, not only because they are true, but also because they provide the moral impulse which alone can lead to that peace for which we all long.
So, a Christian politician lauded her religious values. Indeed, she might have been inspired by her religion. So what? If that is an appeal to authority, let me appeal to a by far greater political authority, Cicero, and, following him, suggest that augurs interpreting auspices be consulted when conducting government affairs. That is meant as a joke, of course. Also, I do not intend to be discrediting Cicero for what he thought was useful in his particular context. But what I do intend to do further on is to hint at your favorite value system being way less pervasive and much more unduly credited than it deserves to be. Anyway, the many inspiring things you could draw from, just those readily available for a sign of the old world, are numerous. The many centuries of extant poetry and prosaic works, the folklore, the marvels of our scientific inquiry, the arts and the ideas engendered therein, and last but not least, the Judeo-Christian Holy Writs and Apocrypha. Luckily, we must not be bound by a game of cherry-picking the quotes from the Bible and the Church Fathers to wring out of them something resembling the way of life which we find fulfilling.
Mrs. Thatcher was a believing Christian. I am a believing Jew. While we have different theologies, we have the same core values. And as far as society is concerned, moral values are far more important than theologies.
Something I can agree with you on. Moral values, virtue, are more important than your private reasoning for them. That does not preclude said reasoning from damaging other aspects of your life, or the life of those around you, for that matter.
That is why traditionally religious Protestants, Catholics, Mormons, and Jews are aligned on almost every important moral issue. Here, then, are 10 of those values. Number 1, there is one God. That God is the God introduced to the world by the Hebrew Bible, or as Christians came to refer to it, the Old Testament.
You forgot about a whole subset of Christianities. I suppose you don't know much about Ukrainian Orthodoxy or Ukrainians, or falsely lump us together with Russians perhaps, but what about Greece? Not Western enough? Quite biased of you. Getting back to the main topic. Spoiler alert, all further discussion of said values shall hinge upon the idea that our value system is contingent upon the notion of the Abrahamic God's existence. Let's imagine that indeed our values are brought to life solely by people professing faith in that God and based on the conception of that God. So the theology does seem to matter to you after all. Now, if said values are perfectly fine, meaningful and enforceable for people lacking belief in said God or actively dismissing his existence, that means that the God of their supposed sculptors is not a prerequisite for their perseverance. I could stop here, but my friend Ahura Mazda feels sad, and I do want to run my mouth alongside Mr. Prager's here, so let us delve deeper.
Number 2. The Hebrew Bible introduced the most revolutionary moral idea in history, that there are objective moral truths, just as there are objective mathematical and scientific truths. Without God, there is no moral truth, only moral opinions.
Wrong. I'll treat your use of objective loosely without waging a definition war. So suppose you mean something like having a grounding outside of the subjective human conceptions. And that's not even something the Bible introduced. Buddhist morality is objective and absolute, and it requires no divinity as it is enforced by the impersonal, inescapable laws of karma. If you affect a state which has negative karmic consequences, you shall reap them, and vice versa, for the right actions. Morality, as expounded by Confucian sages, can also be viewed as objective, derived from their understanding of the workings of heaven and the ideal order, reflecting the most beneficial state for humankind. Similarly, Krishna, explaining the correct yoga to Arjuna, is also quite objective about it, as he is the avatar of the Supreme Being. So is the moral judgment of Zeus, to which Hesiod is appealing in his works and days. And even were one to raise a specific concept to be the grounding, that would be objective, but not absolute, as long as it does not depend on the personal opinion of any specific human. For example, maximum prosperity of the human society.
Number 3, because there are moral truths, good and evil are the same for all people.
Obviously not, and the interpretations differ. Even within said objective morality, there are different gray areas. Is inflicting this or that amount of suffering evil if it bears good fruit in due time? So on. Your God is quite happy-go-lucky about genocide when it benefits his people, for instance. Presumably, within the context of his morality, or does he have none, it is fine.
God, not man, not government, not popular opinion, not a democratic vote, is the source of our rights. The American Declaration of Independence declares that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Number 5,
God is not the source of our rights. We define our rights as social creatures based on consensus, to a varying degree forced and axiomatically traditionalist. Deistic platitudes in the Declaration of Independence do not prove your point. The men, having drafted it, did so based on their perceptions of their preferred social order. But if invoke divine aspects of nature you must, Cicero be your foundational guide.
human being is created in the image of God. Therefore, every human life is precious, and therefore race is of no significance because God has no race. Number 6.
Created in the image of gods, you mean? Votaries of Abrahamic religions were quite fond of racial and ethnic discrimination. For example, using the concept of Ham, the son of Noah, progeny being inferior, suitable to serve the other two's descendants. Well, let's take the favorite Christian's disdain for your people, based on the perception of them having killed the Christian Messiah, and moreover, having passed the guilt for that murder down the germline.
The world is based on divine order, and order is made by distinctions. Among these divine distinctions are God and man, God and nature, man and woman, human and animal, good and evil.
Humans have always categorized and juxtaposed things. The divine versus the human versus the animal, the male versus the female, the good versus the evil, opposing or complementary sets, are neither Judeo-Christian nor culturally unique. nor has Christianity introduced them here. You can go on to extend them: the sacred versus the profane, the civilized versus the barbaric, the republican versus the monarchist, the Christian versus the pagan. And given what is due to the perspective you omit by silence, the traditional versus the Christian, and overall the many facets of them versus us.
Number 7, man is not basically good. Christians speak of original sin in referring to man's nature. Jews cite what God said in Genesis: the will of man's heart is evil from his youth. Both beliefs are diametrically opposed to the naive modern belief that man is basically good, and they lead to the same conclusion: we need God-based rules to keep us from our natural inclinations. Number 8.
A lot to unpack. Firstly, a naive modern belief that man is good. Citation needed. Secondly, it's not modern. Menzi based his Confucian philosophy on the view that man's nature has many positive inclinations, which one should capitalize on to lead man to be upright. Sun Tzu, on the contrary, maintained that man's nature is evil, and the selfish desires by far outweigh any hypothetical inherent benevolence. Thus, like a crooked piece of wood, man ought to be rectified by the teaching of sages. For Buddhists, moral knowledge and action are the basis of becoming a good person. For if one has no knowledge of the cause and effect, the arousal of different states of being, and grabs at that which is impermanent and inherently lacking substance, wealth, lust, power, one shall be locked in the flux of emotions and outcomes without a way out. A way to live a more fulfilling life, and eventually extinguishing that held within the bonds of samsara. Original sin, if explained as lasting from the first pair of humans to the current generation, is a vile and degenerate doctrine, branding any human being as inherently broken and cursed. I personally revile those who spread it, and it is not even required to be a Christian. When I was one, I should make a video on that perhaps, I did not believe that there is any such ungodly thing degrading humans from birth. For me, the tale of Eden was an allegory about why humans are not perfect immortal beings, why they need to improve their plight with advancements of civilized life, a civilized and a moral life. Basically, that is what it is. And a theological myth about why humans have the capacity for understanding, yet are not godlike in permanence. For they have not partaken of the tree of life. One thing we do agree upon, though: we need rules to regulate our social interactions. And that is what our millennia of social life have taught us, on all levels: individual, family, clan, tribe, city, state, global.
Therefore, our natural inclinations are a very poor moral guide. As religious Jews and Christians put it, don't follow your heart. A lot of terrible things have been done and are being done now by people thinking their hearts are better guides than Judeo-Christian values.
The source books of your purported Judeo-Christian values have proved to be quite a terrible guide, as you can derive anything from them to fit your agenda. Thus, perhaps our values are a tad more abstract and ideologically disconnected from those scriptures. Theologies are not that relevant, are they?
Human beings have free will and are therefore responsible for how they behave. In the secular world, free will does not exist, because all human behavior is the result of biology and environment. And if there is no free will, people are not responsible for what they do, good or bad.
Free will is even less possible in a world created by an omniscient and all-powerful creator, a common view on God. For by virtue of being both, that creator has created all outcomes in advance. If one were to invoke the notion of a soul, that just adds one more variable. Regardless, most conceptions, religious or legal, presuppose responsible agency, either real or perceived. Environment and genetics are real influences. Whether we have or not have a free, semi-free or no free will, so non sequitur. Also, secular does not equal deterministic. It has no bearing on one's opinion in regard to this matter. What it means is, you can privately believe in whatever and not be forced to accept state-sanctioned belief. Unlike Christian nations of the recent past, numerous contemporary Islamic nations, and the Soviet Union. I do beg for the surcease of categorical errors.
Number 10. The Ten Commandments. They are the core of Judeo-Christian values. In fact, if everyone lived just by the Ten Commandments, we wouldn't need armies or even police.
No armies and no police, except when God gives you a special permit to seize new land from the infidels. First of all, there are numerous other religious or philosophical systems offering a working ethics. For example, Buddhism, which unlike the Bible is consistent in its morality, take it or leave it, and requires no overseeing divinity. A better offer if one must choose one. As for the Ten Commandments, most are about one pledging loyalty to that specific God. Meaning, first you discard your identity, then you follow the no killing, no stealing, no adultery, no covetousness group, which you have been most likely taught anyway by your parents, your educators, your original faith's priests, and your government or elders. In many cases, marketing by sword was quite persuasive, though I by no means insist on that having been the way always, mostly when the religious were in power.
There's another important aspect to the term Judeo-Christian. The two religions need each other. Without the Old Testament, there is no New Testament. Virtually every Christian moral principle derives from the Hebrew Bible. Not only the 10 Judeo-Christian values I just enumerated, but such basic moral principles as love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord your God, and love the stranger.
Also, kill witches, keep your slaves if you follow the rules, have women know their place, make the victim marry her rapist, kill disobedient children, and so on.
At the same time, Jews need Christians. It was overwhelmingly Christians who carried knowledge of the Hebrew Bible to the world. Judeo-Christian refers to one other fact. No religions in the world share a common revelation the way Judaism and Christianity do.
So, a breakaway Jewish sect has a great deal in common with you. So what? Why should we, Gentiles, care?
That common revelation is the Hebrew Bible. The only two religions that share that Bible, or any sacred work, are Judaism and Christianity. The ultimate embodiment of Judeo-Christian values has been the United States of America.
Not really, discounting the references to a creator in the founding documents. Otherwise, it seems you had to wait for centuries to try out a slave-owning republic of the ancients, added the secularizing flavor of the Enlightenment.
America's founders were Christians, some culturally, some theologically, who were rooted in the Old Testament. So much so that Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin designed a seal for the United States that depicted God leading Israel out of Egypt, just as they believed God was leading America out of Europe.
Yeah, the Christian symbolism certainly is there. Let's recall the New Jerusalem symbolism, which was quite strong with the first settlers and shared by those born thereafter. The coming out of the bondage of the old fatherland into the hope of the new one was meaningful for the people. The interplay of different symbols and narratives just evinces the complex cultural context we live in, there is also quite notably a rejection of the divinely sanctioned rule, as it's we, the people, under an increasingly more distant and abstract creator. Stoics, Epicureans, anybody? That creator must have awarded his creatures with the faculties and minds to perceive for themselves that which is good and proper, for they declare it, not the demiurge.
Only if we keep these values will we keep America, and for that matter, Western civilization. I'm Dennis Prager. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to discuss this. I'm pretty sure if we discard the talk of gods and demons, we shall agree on at least half of our values. The issue is that you are forcing your specific interpretive framework, your theology, on something which is not really dependent on it. So let me sum it up in the same manner to return the favor. To sum it up, if we keep our improved and updated Hellenistic values, broadly speaking as encompassing the results of the political expansion and cultural contact following Alexander's campaigns, with or without the Christian flair, we shall be safe in keeping the Western civilization intact. Praise Jupiter and Minerva. Thus, Christians have preserved, in some cases reclaimed, and built upon the precious seeds of our Hellenistic culture. It in turn built upon the fruits of earlier achievements. Our philosophers, our aesthetics, our magnificent tragedies and comedies, our sciences, though then still indistinguishable from philosophical conjecture and occult practices, our discourse on the human animal, on law, on the state, on our moral and civic duties. Thank Zeus, they were so engaged upon professions of their symbol of faith, squabbling at their church councils and persecuting each other for doctrinal differences, that they failed to get much further past the destruction of the formal display of adherence to our ancient roots. Because those are their roots as well. We still make merry at our grand festivals, still care and not care about the divine, and still integrate knowledge from all over the world as our forebears have done. And not only that, many of our local customs, which have nothing to do with the Byzantine Empire and Rome, have survived, changed, were remythologized and reconceptualized, but are alive, still pretty pagan, though renamed, and true to our spirits. A perfect syncretic amalgamation that is our European culture, vivid, living, local and global. This is our true multiculturalism, our true tradition, not subject to the dystopian authoritarianism of your imperial Christianity. And if Christian, we shall practice our creed apart from yours. If Jewish, we do not require to cling on to Christians to get credit for anything. Quintus Aurelius Symmachus was right. Uno itenere non potest perveniri ad tam grande secretum. You cannot reach such a grand mystery by one path. And you have not reached it. You're just regurgitating a 1,000-year-old pretense. You might have destroyed the altar of victory, but you are the bearers of that same culture which erected it. Our great legacy. So do not take foam for the wave, lest the ocean of human thought stay concealed from you.